well, we could go ahead and like start doing introductions. And if any other folks join us, we'll just sort of have them fold in. But we're super stoked to have you guys here. Thanks so much for joining us. We're kind of doing some new things this year. So if you have been a part of a Clubhouse in the past, things will just be like ever so slightly different this time around. But we are, instead of doing monthly, we're going to do it every other month. We just sort of felt like personally that fit into our schedules a little bit better. So hopefully maybe that might help out you guys to just be able to, you know, come in more frequently. And in addition to that, instead of just sort of like making it so we always have to come up with what we're going to talk about, we wanted to have like basically a guest speaker each time. So we'll bring in maybe somebody who has an expertise that could sort of like help us grow within our businesses, but also we'd love to have like guest speakers of folks in our industry too that we feel like are like really killing it and that like we've been wanting to basically ask questions of. We kind of always like consider those folks like our brand crushes basically. So if there's anyone that you guys think is really good at that stuff, or you're like, man, I would love to like have a, you know, AMA with so-and-so, let us know and we'll do the legwork to see if we can get them. So with that being said, I'd love to sort of just introduce real quick. Well, first I'll introduce our team and then I'll pass it over to Melissa to do an introduction. I'm Christy, one of the partners at Campfire Co. And we have 3 of our other team members here today. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Christina and I'm one of the co-founders of Campfire Co. And working now, I do a lot of creative direction and work on our interiors projects.
Vaishon Brandon, one of the graphic designers, so mostly working on ground level with branding and whatnot.
And I'm Rachel Hallett, also with Campfire, and I work on the interior side of things, and I've been with Campfire for, I guess, almost 3 years now. Doesn't feel like it, but anyways. Excited to talk today.
Cool. And then maybe real quick, we can just have everybody like say, all of our attendees, like just say your name and maybe like your business name and maybe just like what industry you're in, what type of design you're in. And then Melissa will wrap up with you and then we can kind of move forward with that. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. Lloyd, I'm going to pick you to start because you're at the top of my screen.
Hey, Lloyd Young. I am currently with VCU Da Vinci Center, and we've launched a new space called Chip Retail Lab. So kind of interior branding is my category.
Cool, sweet. Nicole, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Nicole Rutledge. I own Nicole Rutledge Design. I am a certified interior designer, and we do a mix of residential and commercial, but mainly residential at this point.
Nicole had a big spread in Richmond Magazine recently. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very big surprise.
Speaking of PR, Jen, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Jen Book. I'm a designer at 903 Creative, so we're another graphic design firm in the fan, and also in the book club. It's unrelated entirely.
Yeah. Rachel and I are in the same book club. Chelsea is too. She's in Florida. Abby?
Good to see you.
Oh, it looks like you.
Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
I'm Abby Barris. I'm an interior designer. My company is Abby Barris Interiors. Keeps it pretty simple. I primarily serve churches and faith-based nonprofits, although also some smaller startups, so kind of like commercial.
Cool. Sweet. Kylie?
Hello, I'm Kylie Heald. I work at Fulton Singh Architects, primarily in interior design.
Awesome. Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Long time no see.
I know. I'm branching out, getting out of my office, sort of virtually getting out. I'm Kathy Connon, and I have an interior design firm in Richmond, Catherine Jordan Design. And Campfire Co. helped me get my website going and my branding, and you guys were great for that. So appreciate all your help.
Last but not least, Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie Gemmer. I'm an architect and I just started my own firm about 2 months ago, Acme Architecture.
Awesome.
Nice to meet you guys.
Sweet. And then we would love to introduce Melissa Grady, who's here from Resplendent Hospitality, and I will let her kind of kick us off with maybe just like, Melissa, you want to give us just a little bit of background on who Resplendent is, and tell us a little bit about, like, basically, if we didn't know anything about PR, what even is that?
Yeah, it's very nebulous. So there's a lot of definitions for it. So I am Melissa. And so we Resplendent Hospitality is an agency that started in Austin, Texas, and we expanded to Northwest Arkansas, and then I'm working on our third location here. We primarily service marketing, public relations, and social media. As the PR landscape changed over the past 10 years that we have been in business, we actually have a very similar track with Campfire Co, so much so that both of our co-founders are actually out on maternity leave right now. So that is just, the stars align between Resplendent and Campfire Co, honestly. And so we were primarily just PR when we first started within the hospitality industry, bars, restaurants, breweries, spirits, but have since expanded a little bit. We're now more focusing on lifestyle, consumer packaged goods, in addition to hospitality. Our Arkansas office, we're finding our niche there still a little bit, and we do a lot of nonprofits, community events, and then also even a micro lending company there. So we're finding our niche there. And then so because of the evolution of PR over the last decade, we added on services like marketing, community relations, and social media. So we now have a dedicated department just devoted just to social media. And we have clients hire us just for that, or for PR and social, just because we started it as just adding it on to our publicist plates, and we quickly realized that it's just a very different skill set and a very different writing style, content creation. That whole thing has also evolved rapidly, as everyone knows. And so PR in a nutshell is really taking your brand voice and mission outside of the four walls of your business or brand, and communicating that externally to people and building awareness, and building an audience to get behind your brand. And so we are super passionate about the industries that we do service, and we are women founded and 100% female staff. So also within that space, we love to kind of spend our times towards women founded companies as well. So
sweet. So one of the things that I was thinking about, before this meeting was basically like, why does PR matter? Like what does it do in terms of, like, obviously it's going to help amplify your voice, but like why, what are folks really getting into PR for? Like what's like a typical set of goals or something that like a business that you guys work with might have?
Yeah, and that's something that we also try to educate our prospective clients on too, just because I think that some people come to us with a very narrowed goal. They're like, I want to be on the cover of Gardening Done magazine. I'm like, cool, you don't even have a website. So let's back up. Let's figure this out here, and really kind of identifying if it's a product, what that product experience is, and who they really want to market to. I think those are kind of the building blocks of a successful PR campaign, much like, same with branding too. And we even like to, refer out if our prospective clients don't even have branding yet. Like that's kind of step one too, just because the market is really saturated right now, especially in consumer packaged goods or in the hospitality industry as well. What makes your, sorry, I have a cat on me as well. You like to what makes your brand and mission different from what's already in your field, and finding that. And so we like to kind of just like do exploratory calls with people of like, okay, like this really, I think this will really resonate with people. And then also identifying what's getting picked up by media now. So media coverage is usually the number one goal for a PR campaign, just because it not only builds the awareness of it, but also builds the clout in a sense that if they're looking for investors, that's typically one of the first things that they look at too. And then secondly, SEO too. So being able to search like, hey, I want to look for, like what are the top 5 Mother's Day presence right now. I want my clients on those types of listicles because when people are searching for that generic, they're discovering a new product or discovering a new service that they could purchase.
Yeah, that's great. So everyone here, we have like basically, I have a couple questions for Melissa, but I would love to just give you guys the opportunity. Full disclosure, we are a client of Melissa's because we love her work, and we kind of got to a place in our business where we realized like there was a level of publication that we wanted to sort of be getting, but it was just outside our depth to be able to figure that out on our own. So we have been working with Melissa for the last like year and a half. And so I have some questions set up for her, but I would just love to give you guys the space to ask your questions.
Yeah,
you can also drop them in the chat if you're like.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat, but I can also go over a little bit of like goals for Campfire, since there are so many interior designers here too. Because for us at Resplendent, and we are very weird mirror trajectories. About a year and a half ago for ourselves, we realized that Resplendent should be a client of our firm, and being able to push our goals and our agency outward, and just being able to just kind of, especially as we want to move into these bigger consumer packaged goods and bigger hospitality fish, like we need to also be branding ourselves. So when I talked to the Campfire Co ladies, that was a similar goal as well. And so getting their projects. So it's like sometimes it gets a little like many layers, because we're really like kind of promoting like the grow offices or things like that, but it's a project done by Campfire Co. So that's something that we wanted to make sure that their portfolio was really being publicized in a way that will kind of showcase their work in where people are looking to either hire agencies or using it as brand inspiration as well.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, working with you, Melissa, it felt like you guys really took a lot of time to understand not just like us, but really our projects and sort of like what the nuance and sort of the flow and the storyline behind those projects. And then we're able to kind of like push that forward in a way that like actually made sense, or like pull out these little threads of like interest to other people that, we don't really see because we're too close. A little bit too close to it, a lot too close to it.
Yeah, we completely get that. Yeah, and then that's like kind of the workshops that we do, because a lot of the businesses that we work with are small businesses, and it's your heart and soul, sweat, blood, tears, like hopefully not too much blood, being poured into the business. And so being able to like kind of have that outside perspective of like, okay, let's pluck this, like this will really resonate right now with what writers are trying to cover for the audience. And so we like to basically present it as that to the writer. We feel that your audience will appreciate this for X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of how you can like kind of not trick, but like that's one of our ways to get the writers to cover it, because I think it's something, if it resonates with their readers, that's going to get them the clicks. And so therefore it's boosting their articles, their publications. So they're also in it for the PR aspect of it and the brand awareness of it too. They're not just going to cover anything because it's a cool story, but like we need to then find out like the niche within it, or what is really going to kind of, when it's a really niche topic, how can we make it broad scale for multiple people to be reading it?
Yeah. It was like you would kind of come back and ask us questions about the project in a way that I was like, well, I didn't really think that part of it was interesting, or like that wasn't really something that I would have thought to tell other people about the project.
And then I also think that also carries into, so we also like to think of it as PR can then also connect to your website. Okay, so if like someone's connecting, if someone's really resonating with this, that's probably a sure sign that it might be good for SEO, or so how can I take that language and add it to my website language, or for social content as well. We like to kind of break it off into pieces. And even though we do have the separate departments, they work pretty close in tandem together. And I try to, because they have their narrow fields too, I'm the mediator and like, okay, so like this is our objective for the social side, but this is our objective for the PR side. It's the same exact execution that we're doing, but like different. For instance, like we're doing right now a collaboration with a gelato shop in a very cool pastry pop-up in Austin. And so like I want that social content out of it, but I also know that Eater Austin or Austin Monthly is going to cover this because it's Vivian's is like one of the top pastry shops right now. So kind of breaking it down of like, how do we reuse this information too? So it's not just if it's a pitch that doesn't land, but like, okay, let's use this for, because sometimes they don't, let's use it for social because we find it really interesting.
Okay.
That's a really good tip though, because I feel like even, you know, when we worked with you, our focus was really like national stuff. And we kind of were like, okay, we're going to take that and then we're going to sort of we're going to remind ourselves that we can handle trying to do some outreach locally. But I never really thought about like, okay, if I put together some sort of like, okay, if I want to email BizSense or something like that to try and cover my project, that I could reuse that language for like, okay, let me just go ahead and put that directly into my case study or directly into my social post. Like, yeah, I think we're getting a little bit better at trying to like templatize that sort of language so that we just reuse it in multiple places. But I hadn't quite connected that to PR. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, we like to anything that we can reuse and even like for you guys, when you guys would answer it, you would answer it in such in depth. And I'm like, great, so this answer exists for this publication, but this is actually a whole new pitch that we can send out to another publication too, because just because there is so much more information that we find out. So it's like we do a pretty heavy upfront homework, and we admit that, but it's because like we learn so much about it, and then it's like, oh, this actually changes our communications plan because we can add this in, we can do this. This writer we know is writing a story about this, so let's kind of pitch it to them. So we're super detail oriented. We're a team of type A people, but it usually produces quality work.
So if you have like, let's say you have like 3 or 4 projects that you recently finished and you're thinking about like which ones you might want to try and get press for, like how do we decide as designers like what makes a project press worthy?
Yeah, I would say kind of going back to the original goals of following. So if it's press that you want to be in, following your favorite publications. And this is something I train my team on, especially the green coordinators coming on, of almost be reading in headlines, newsletters. What is the headline, the subject line of that newsletter, especially from publications? What is the social post that they're posting right now? What are the top 5 articles right now on their homepage? And what is the subject of those headlines? Because unfortunately, a lot of readers don't get past the headline. And so finding that and saying, okay, like, hey, I just covered that. So that publication might not cover it, but someone else will. Just because they'll, if it's something that they just recently covered, they're likely not going to cover it for a few months, unless it's something like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, those timely things. But if it's something that you can be reading in and just kind of converting and relating your press goals into, oh, hey, like this headline really resonates with me. Like I could maybe just reach out to another editor, which the editors are typically always in the masthead that you can find in print, in finding their emails and things like that, but a lot of the times right now it's freelance based. So we have like a software ourselves that finds those a lot easier and can aggregate media lists. But the old school way is to kind of look at the masthead.
Cool.
I'm curious about
question. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, I'm curious about how you talked about SEO and figuring out what's already being picked up by the media. When you're doing like that all-encompassing evaluation of a company before you dive in, what tools are you using?
A lot of it is honestly still organic. And we have a team of 12 between the 3 offices. So we like to get together as a team and really figure out like, hey, I'm seeing, and this is like a very obscure, but like a few years ago, we just kept seeing stories on vodka. And this year it's actually gin. Like Bon Appetit just did a big gin coverage. Men's Journal just did a gin coverage. So I'm like, okay, which of our clients have gin cocktails right now, or a very cool like gin spirit? So therefore we could pivot and pitch that out, because we're seeing that trend keeps popping up. And so it's really just kind of, that's how we get ahead of the trends, is like, okay, if like one person's, now 2 people are seeing it, 3 people are doing it, like let's jump on it really quick. And it does require kind of a quick pivot, and like sometimes throwing out some comms plan ideas and bumping them for like evergreen ideas. But it's really just kind of seeing that organic reading. I devote probably the first half hour, sometimes an hour, to just reading the news in the morning. When I start reading my newsletters, reading Austin publications, Northwest Arkansas, and the national ones, just so I can kind of know what's going on, and finding those areas of interest that the writers are picking up.
Gotcha. So what are if you only had 3 news sources to rely on, what would your top 3 be?
Ooh,
not all print, like maybe there are other.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm a New York Times gal, especially just because they have so many different sections, like Grub Street, that's their like hospitality. New York Times. I would say, I realize this is an incredibly problematic, but I'm excited that Condé Nast, or they're forming a union within Condé Nast, but Bon Appetit. I still think that, like, just because I'm in the hospitality industry, I still think that they are creating the food industries. And then third, I would say, that's a good one. Oof. Not like, I don't know, not like Jezebel, but like one of those, like The Kitchen or something like that, to kind of see, like, I feel like those kind of have a good mass audience as to like what they're covering. And so that way you can kind of find obscure publications from there to cover that. And then also identifying your goals. So if you really only want to expand within your city or within your region, just kind of finding those local publications that could cover you. But if you have goals of expanding outside of the area that you are in, if you say you want to, you are working on a project in Maryland or North Carolina, resonating with those publications that are getting picked up there, and finding that, because sometimes there is a writer there, like there's a few writers here that live locally, but they cover nationally, which has been really great to get to know and get to know the audience here.
Wow. So you just wake up and think about food all day?
All day, literally, yeah. Yeah, the short end is I just tell people I eat and drink for a living, which is, which is so much, I wear many more hats than that, but I'm just like, man, when I'm trying to explain, especially to my mom, what I do in PR, it's like, she literally still clips like articles of like a restaurant in DC that I've never heard of, and she'll just send it to me being like, did you place this? And I'm like, no, I didn't, but
there's nothing better than like moms clipping articles and mailing them to you. It's like they just all do it. They all do it.
Oh, yeah, every single one of them. Yeah.
She'll mail me things that I've printed for her and be like, I would like for you to reprint these stickers for me. Physically mail it. Like, could you just reply to your email or something?
Text.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's great.
Do you ever take the secret shopper role, like where you go into an experience?
Yes.
And then kind of hide in the background and then give them a review based on stealth observations?
Yeah, that's something that we like to do. And if we try to do it with not without the guest knowing, but just being like, hey, we're going to come in the next 2 weeks. So that way, because we did notice at first when we would have them set it up, like we would get a full VIP experience with our clients and things like that. And so, but like then we kept hearing from writers or people that we'd invite in, they're like, our server or whoever, took us like 40 minutes to greet our table and things like that. And we're like, man, that is not the experience we had. So we just kind of give them a window when we're coming in, and we try not to give them the exact date. So that way we can really like gauge, okay, this is where we see areas of improvement. Like if you want to be nominated for a James Beard, like this menu is not it, or the service isn't it, and things like that. And so that's something that we do like to get feedback on, and also doing a true like customer analysis, especially if it's a consumer packaged goods. Like we ordered ourselves, we want to see the box that it's coming in, we want to see the unboxing moment, and how long it takes us to get a confirmation email, how long it takes us to get a shipping notification, things like that. Because I feel like, unfortunately, with small businesses, it does take longer, but Amazon has really ruined that. Like people expect it within hopefully a week of when they're getting it. But we also do understand that it's really hard to fulfill that sometimes. And so if it is, then we want to include that messaging in the confirmation email, like, hey, we're a small and mighty team, we're working on this as quickly as possible, you can expect it in this date. So that way there are expectations being set, and knowing that if you don't have that bandwidth, like just like being upfront. So we're also noticing on our end too, just like setting those expectations up front of like, I think our number one question is like from clients, like, when can we expect our first press hit? And I'm like, not within the first month, because like we like to do that onboarding period of really getting to know you guys. If there's something that we see timely that we can pitch you for, we will, but we really like to do the onboarding. So we work in 6-month campaigns, and really 5 of it is like proactive work.
Melissa, we had a question in the chat, which I think is super, like a really helpful one. But basically, when you're working on a project and you have like professional photos of professional mock-ups or things like that, and you kind of like have that together and you want to get it published in a magazine, do you have any like best practices on whether or not you should publish that on like your own social or your own website first, or should you wait and try and get it published in print first?
There's 2 ways that you could tackle it. If you can almost do like kind of like sneak peeks of it, and breaking it out so it's not like the full project being not exposed, but like being promoted. And so that is something that you could do. And then I'm sure everyone knows, but always get permission from the photographer first, and make sure you have the rights of those photos before you're using them, because that is something I still have to educate my clients on daily. And then another thing too is if Interior Design Magazine or something like that is one that you want to be in, look at the hashtags that they're using, or even tagging them when you post, because they could even if it's just them regramming it, that's still like coverage that you would have been not had, because that's where they're looking for content, and they're just like everyone else, where they too need content ideas, so if it's something that resonates with their project, their kind of grid aesthetics, that's a way that like I've announced news before. If I couldn't get coverage on something, I literally just posted it and I tagged all the local media that I wanted to cover it, and like 3 of them picked it up from that. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
What a good trick.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm definitely going to do that.
I will trick you. You don't want to talk about this, but I will trick you.
Yeah. And so that's something too. And then also to just, going back to, if you really want to do those sneak peeks, but have a specific publication in mind that you want to, go ahead and reach out to their like editorial team. And sometimes it's even just editorial at Condé Nast or editorial at Interior Design Magazine. And then have that good subject line of like almost written in headline form. And that's our trick too, is like, if we write it in headline form, like we've had writers sometimes just copy and paste our pitch because we've written it in their style of how they want it. And so that is really something too that you can just like be like, you know, the latest spring trend or something like that, and sending it to them that way.
That's great. Abby asked in the chat, basically, how do you know when you're ready to hire someone in the PR world? Like, are there specific things that you want your clients to sort of have in place before they start working with you?
Yes. So sometimes we've gotten a lot better about it. We would in our youth, we would take on clients too soon, and then but we just felt we realized that like it was a waste of money for them, and just so we really try to be conscious of that now. So having a website or a portfolio, it can even just be splash page, or just having some sort of digital presence is step one. Having an Instagram account with a couple, you know, even a couple posts of who you are, and the type of projects that you have, that can be a digital portfolio that you could link to in PR. And then branding. Do you have a logo? Do you have a few high-res imagery that we could pitch with? That's always our question of like, do you have images? Because really, if we're pitching something, especially an interior design project without photos, it's not going to get picked up. It's very low odds. They want to see that. They want to make sure it fits within their aesthetics of the publication. And that's always our number one question nowadays, is like, what images do you have for us? Because we want to make sure they're not just, and iPhone shots are great for social, but if it's something like a pretty higher end magazine, we need like a professional shoot done.
Okay, that's great.
Do you help clients out with, like you mentioned, having the rights to use photography? And I will say this is a challenge we have had, I don't know, for years. But every photographer seems to have like different sort of licensing rights. They're not super consistent. Some are easier to work with than others. Sometimes they just send me back a document that's like literal gibberish. And I'm like, okay, so I can't use the photos I just paid you for? Like, I don't understand. What is the point of this?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Something that is going to become more universal, or do you help clients with that part?
We do, yeah. And yes, it's incredibly difficult. And so the one consistent thing I've seen is kind of appeal to their portfolio and being like, okay, be very upfront with the usage of it. So I would like to use this in a newsletter, website, and social media and media pitching. Basically, where it gets into the sticky part and where the licensing that I've worked with for photographers is if you are using it to resell something like pamphlets, marketing, like digital, like digital courses where you're going to use the imagery that you're selling to people, that's like kind of where it gets into the sticky situation that I found. But if you're really upfront, like I'm using this for this, this, and this, and I will also credit you anytime that it's used. And so that's something that I've found has been mildly successful. For licensing rights for the amount, we as an agency, when we do a photo shoot, we just give lifetime licensing because we're not, in 2 years, we're not checking that. We do not have a team for that. Like that is just, that's silly. And then I've even pitched it to a few photographers who have done that. And I specifically say that, and I'm like, hey, like if, you know, like, are you going to check up on us in 2 years to have this? Like, do you have the bandwidth to do that? Like things like that. And like, when I've like positioned it to them, they're like, no, I don't. So let's just do lifetime. And then I pay like an extra like $500, which is a lot of money for some businesses. But photos, I would say like photos are the one thing I say not to skimp on budget wise. Like those are something that you can reuse across multiple platforms. And especially in the design world, like that just really showcases your work. And so those are the things that I'm like, if you're going to invest in the one thing first, have it be photos.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. Jesse had a question about asking clients for their permission about publicizing projects and whether like that's something that we should be asking our clients about before we try and get their work published. And then when you guys do a pitch, like how deep do you go in terms of like crediting other people involved in the project?
Yeah, we try to go pretty deep, honestly, into crediting. Even for you guys, you sometimes even credit down to like the furniture. And one, I do that because we also want to put it on that company's radar too, like who Campfire Co is. But two, it just covers all bases. You would just need to have someone come like a month later and ruin that like beautiful press fit they had, being like, excuse me, we worked together and like I didn't get any recognition for this, which it just works easier to cover your bases first. And as for permission, I would almost like give a courtesy heads up, like, hey, our team is planning on pitching this out. We are trying to achieve national. So it's not really like asking a question, but it's just like giving awareness of like, we're planning on using this as part of our portfolio to promote this. And then if they have a issue with that, or if they have another firm or an agency working on it too, that's also something to give the PR firm the heads up. So it's not like we're both pitching the same publication trying to get that, because then it also kind of like looks not great on the client or the publicist either.
Right, especially if it's like a commercial client. We just like a tip, Jesse, like one of the things that we ask in our inquiries, or not, it's not an inquiry survey, but when basically after we sign a client, we have them fill out a design questionnaire before our first meeting. And we added a question on our design questionnaire that is like, can we tell other people we're working with you? And is it okay to share any process work? It doesn't actually say like, is it okay if we, seek publicity for this project? But I feel like that's kind of like, we just integrated it into a part of our process where like we don't have to remember to ask that question, if that makes sense. So I could see us adding like a third question there that's like, do you have any issue with us trying to seek press for this project? And then if they say like, yes or no or whatever, then we could follow up on that later. Because it's just, you forget. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I just spent like 2 weeks working on this pitch and now I have to actually remind to go ask someone, and like if they said no, you'd be like, oh my god, I wasted all that time. Anyways,
that's really smart, because I mean I've had clients say no after the pictures were taken to putting it on a website even.
Oh really?
Which is like, a lot.
Is it mostly like residential work?
No, it's commercial. It's like people that don't want anything like private to accidentally be like, they just have a blanket legal ban, which we didn't know about until too late.
Oh wow.
That's yeah, that's something we actually worked with an art curator in doing their PR, and so that's something that was our first thing of like, okay, which of your clients, because they mostly did residential, high-end residential, which of your clients would be comfortable photographing their space, because they just didn't have any imagery of their work, and it's because they really worked on people's homes and like how many people want to publicize their personal home and things like that, especially for high profile people that they were working with. So that was a big challenge, but it was something like, okay, like let's select 2 to 3 that you think would be able to do this. And then we can write up something that like, this is where we plan to share it. And this is where I think as long as you're really transparent about that process, that's typically where people are more susceptible to agreeing.
Yeah. Multiple people mentioned in the chat that basically having it also in your contract can be helpful. Basically just go ahead and like tucking it in there, so that if someone signs your contract, in theory, you're legally allowed to do it. Absolutely. But honestly, like I would say out of the 8 years I've worked at Campfire, I think we've had like 3 people asked to change something in the contract. So like people do not read them. So like that's the only hard part about tucking stuff in your contract, like protects you legally, but it doesn't always like prevent a dispute because like people don't read it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the people were actual lawyers too.
Yeah. Well, there was one that was like a lawyer, but then honestly the art gallery client, she made us change the part of the thing that said we could share her stuff, because like I guess they wanted to be very specific about who shared it when, and they were also concerned about, I think our contract says something about like asking people to credit us when they share the branding and design work, and I don't know, she had a problem with that. I was like, okay. It's mostly just like a courtesy, like please do this. But
help us help you, you know?
Yeah, basically. It's funny though that you mentioned like, crediting people as far as like even furniture designers, or like, when we're even sharing like branding and stuff work, I'll tag like Adobe or Squarespace or like things like that. And I found that even just having someone like that share something that we do on social is almost like more helpful sometimes than even getting something in print. Like, as much as like we were so freaking excited to get the Grow project on Interior Design Magazine's website, like that was like a real milestone for us, like professionally. I think we got maybe like 3 hits to our website from that project, but like, like Office Snapshots, which is like a little bit less, I don't know, prestigious, like in terms of getting your projects, we have gotten like 15 times as many hits directly to our website from that press than we did from the more like prestigious stuff. But it just has like a different ROI, I guess.
It does. And that's what we try to educate our clients on, like back to the person that wants to be on Garden and Gun magazine. I'm like, that really is for ego. Like that, like I hate to like say this because it's my industry, but like media is dying. And so like how, yeah, especially in print, but like the digital footprint of it is critical. And so that's why we try to like really educate our clients too. Like they're like, I want to be in print of this. And I'm like, okay, but how many people are you actually reaching in print? Because I just bought a subscription for an entire year to a magazine for $6. Like that's how bad it used to be like, used to be like $75, $80 to like subscribe to those. And it's like in my magazine, it's like a like very cool like drink magazine, but like, like no one's getting in print anymore. So like, let's focus on the digital aspect of it. And then that's why we really like to sell social media in tandem to it. So we have those different objectives, but you can also really see the ROI there as well. Of, if we're collaborating with and doing like a partnership, like that really actually grows your audience more. What we're seeing is like doing those partnerships and those collaborations with different brands.
Totally.
Yeah, that like really resonate with you. And so seeing a good ROI there is always successful.
Yeah, having somebody reshare something that we post is like sometimes like infinitely more valuable than like any other press we get, because it's not only people see it, but we get a bunch of new followers, and then you've invited an audience to stay with you in a way that like other press doesn't really get, like sort of that result.
And that's something too, if you're seeing like an influx of followers on something, one, remember what that is, because you want to add that in like a couple days, or at least like maybe 2 weeks, just because the social media trends change so quickly. You want to add that back in. And then 2, that's a good time to do a reintroduction of who your brand is, so you can capture and maintain that audience, the new people that are coming in. So who are you guys? What does your team do? What are the services? And it could just be easy as like, we have some new faces around here, let us do a reintroduction. And so that's something too. And then also could be linking back to blog posts as well that you already have written, so you don't have to like create entirely new content, or could reshare just old content that you have up about who your brand is.
Yeah, I'm like so bad at that.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
no, go for it.
Here's that had like a window of time, and of course they showed up right here. Sorry. I've had a few like contractors and architects not tag me, like I've gotten them the job, and like tagged them on everything, and like they're not tagging me back. Do you have any advice for that?
Do you have like a point person that you like connect with, and just like, would you feel comfortable being like, hey, like I'd love for, and that's something too, what I like to kind of a mental, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but a mental mindfuck of like, hey, like what, like, hey, do you mind tagging in that so I can reshare your work or something, or like reshare it so it's like, so I'm like kind of like sharing it with my audience, like your platform. And so that's something too, it's a little, just tiny little manipulation. But also just like, like, or if you provide any photos, and just, I always just say like, here are the handles. If you share it, we'd love for you to tag us. And just, I'm always pretty direct about that as well.
Nicole, I feel that real hard because that happens to us a lot too. And it drives me crazy because tagging someone takes little, like zero effort. And all it does is like, it lets me help amplify, right? And like, I would reshare if somebody else tagged us. And I used to get like really, honestly, like to be totally truthful, like very personally offended by it. Like, I feel like people are leaving us out on purpose. And I've realized like, that's, 9 times out of 10, that is not the case. Like, people are just like, somebody random is doing social. They don't really know the history of it, or they just forget, like they're literally bad at it. And so sometimes I will just like immediately send someone like a reply to the image and be like, oh, this is so cool. Would you mind tagging us in this? And like 9 times out of 10 people are like, oh yeah, my bad. And they just like literally they just forgot. It's annoying, but it's taken me a little while to like sort of get over like the emotional hurt.
It does.
I'm
trying to help you.
Yeah, like if you had a picture of you and your best friend, you wouldn't not tag them. So like, why wouldn't you tag us?
We're all best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just about to say that as well in the chat of not knowing best practices. Yeah, and so that's why I always try to make them clear, because like I think like social media surrounds us at this point, but like not for everybody. And I always forget that. And I'm like, oh, just like that's what I feel like. And some clients I even have to walk through and just be like, click this button to do this and like things like that. And I'm like, oh, whoa, we live, even my husband, I'm like, that's how you send an email? Like what? Yeah. Sometimes I just forget that like other people aren't embedded quite in this industry as we are.
We had a photographer reach out to us after I shared a photo, and I tagged her in the photo, but I didn't list her handle in the caption. And she replied to me. And this is a photographer, we had paid a lot of money for these photos, and we had not only paid for the shoot, we had paid for extra rights to use them. And so like, I feel like I had given her a lot through this relationship. And she like wrote me and was like, hey, would you mind putting my handle in the caption as well as the photo? And I was like, wow, that is a bold ask. Like, I literally already tagged you and you're asking me to tag you twice. And at first I was like, wow, that is really like just a lot. And but I did it. And so I'm like, if she could do that, I could certainly like reach out to people and ask for one tag.
Yeah, I would just say like, don't be afraid to ask, because it usually is just someone overlooking it or not knowing best practices. Like Christy said, it's like very rarely they're leaving you off on purpose, but and then just don't be afraid to ask.
So Kathy was asking about like, as a solopreneur, she has a hard time posting on social. So do you think that hiring a PR firm or someone else, like basically who's the best person to go to for hiring someone to maybe help out with social?
Yeah, that's a good question. So not every PR firm is going to do social. There are still those old school firms that really just focus on community relations and media placements. It's really finding a firm that one is kind of specializing in your area of expertise, and two, what services do they offer? And it could just be a Google search of like social media agencies near me, and things like that, if that's the service that you want to go for, and just kind of vetting those. Social media is getting increasingly expensive, just because of the way the algorithm is now favoring short videos, graphics, all that jazz. But we mostly service social media, or mostly service small businesses. So therefore we try to not nickel and dime everyone, because we know most of their budget is going to us for marketing. And so finding those shortcuts that we can do, like even just like, okay, like let's do this 30-second video, but break it into three different reels and things like that. So not every not every PR firm is going to do social, but there are, especially even locally, there are some firms that do just straight up social media too.
I was just adding, we have like a couple, I don't know if you guys maintain this, but we have an in-house like sort of spreadsheet that we use to keep track of referrals. And so social media is something that clients ask about pretty frequently. The hard thing is that like, sometimes it feels like social media freelancers kind of like come in and out of the industry. Like they'll be there for a year and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore. But there are
hard.
Yeah, there are 3 folks that we do refer people to. So I just dropped those in the chat if anybody is interested. Obviously you guys can reach out to Melissa too. But I just wanted, if you wanted something specific to social media, those are some folks that we refer people to.
I'll put my email in the.
Yeah. Also, if anybody else wants to like drop in like your social or like a link to social or anything like that, I'd love to be able to follow you guys if we're not already. I feel like we're following most everybody here, which is great. So we've got just about like 5 more minutes. I will just ask real quickly in case anybody like has something on top of their mind, but like, does anybody else, do you guys have any other specific like topics or people or companies that you would like us to feature in a future Clubhouse event? Does anything come to mind? I know it's like a little bit like on the spot question. Okay, we'll keep thinking on it. You guys can like reply to us or send us a DM on Instagram. Melissa, thank you so much for your time today. This was like an incredibly illuminating conversation, even for like people that currently work with you. That was like incredible. You guys should definitely follow Resplendent on Instagram. They're like, all of their images are beautiful, and they're a great follow. And yeah,
I'm working on some more Richmond content. It's pretty Northwest Arkansas or Austin heavy, but working on some more Richmond content, especially as we're seeking clients in the Richmond area too. So yeah, I appreciate you guys for having me on. I always, anytime you guys want to chat, I'm there. So.
Sweet. We'll put a recording of this up on YouTube, and so if you guys want to watch again, or if there's something here you wanted to come back to, you certainly can, or if you want to share with a friend, we would love to sort of continue to grow this community event. We'll be meeting, it's March, April, so our next conversation will be in May, and if you guys sign up for the series, you'll get like automatic notices about the next one, but if not, we'll send out an email and it'll be on social and everything too. So yeah, anything else? Did I forget? No, we're good. Okay. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Have a good rest of your day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Have a good day.
Bye.